Farhan Lalji is joining us. Farhan has started the show by talking about last night and the Vancouver Canucks. And I'm sitting this is a true story. I'm sitting there at home and I say to the wife, I'm like, it's 9:45 and like we're laying in bed. We're like, this is what planet are we on?
You're old.
No, like the kids have nothing going on. I flip on the hockey game and I'm like, oh, Vancouver 2-0. There's no way I'm hitting an in-game bet Anaheim to come back. I'm like, they're in a playoff push. Like, I'm crazy. then they give up 3 goals in the second. Then they give up 2 in the third. And I would have been flying to Vancouver today to golf if I would have hit that bet. I don't know. How do you explain this hockey team?
Well, first of all, they're really limited, and their best players aren't there. I mean, Quinn Hughes returned to the lineup and did as well as he could in these past 2 games. I thought he's been fine for the most part. Still a little rusty, shaking that off. But, you know, at the end of the day, this team has a lot of offensive limitations. Artur Shilovs, who was last year's playoff goaltending hero, really struggled badly coming out of the gate, right? And then when they came back from 4 Nations and he had to play, he actually played really well the other night, didn't play well last night. They don't have the offensive scoring pop at all to ever outscore any mistakes. You know, every game it's a different story, but one thing is clear, they're not good enough offensively. And then defensively, you saw an Anaheim team that is really has been good this year at playing off the rush. They do manage to generate offense off the rush specifically, and the Canucks struggled in that area, right? So you give up rush chances, your goaltender isn't good, and you can't outscore your mistakes. And, you know, we'll probably keep saying it till we're blue in the face, but while Quinn Hughes does his part, Elias Pettersson certainly doesn't do his, and that makes it tough offensively for the entire group.
You know, there's been lots of conversation around Pettersson and what he is and isn't doing, and right, whether he's in some sort of funk or injury. But on top of that, there's the unsettled dressing room. Is Brock Besser going to be there? Are they going to move him? Is he going to sign? Right? Quinn Hughes is hurt. Peterson's playing like he's lost his stick. What's really going on inside that room?
Well, it's a great question, and I say that because we kind of had a sense of what was going on in the room until JT Miller got traded, right? And we knew the room was a mess, and they got rid of JT, and that was supposed to settle things down. And then there was a 4-game stretch going into the 4 Nations break where it did. That if you had gone in there, the room felt like a different place. The players, while they liked JT Miller, all understood that the current situation couldn't continue. And, you know, so everything was trending in the right direction. So I don't know that the room is an issue right now, but there is a talent issue, right? This team is really slow. They're not dynamic offensively. And when you come into the year, I mean, 2 years ago, this team was outstanding down the middle. There was so much optimism at Pettersson, Miller, and Bo Horvat. And you trade Bo Horvat, now you trade JT Miller, and Pettersson is nowhere to be found. So they have nothing down the middle at all. So it's a real challenge for them because when you can't play down the middle, it does make everybody else worse, right? Like Brock Besser, you mentioned he might get traded, right? So they've got to make a decision there. Brock Besser's probably had that going through his mind at the deadline in more than half of his 8 seasons that he's been a Vancouver Canuck. So I don't know that part is any different than what a normal team goes through, but, you know, these guys aren't players that can create their own chances without a facilitator or a distributor, and they don't have that. So they're slow. You know, Philip Hedl comes into the lineup and Drew O'Connor instantly they become faster because of those 2 guys. Well, you know, those guys aren't elite players, but it just shows how slow they are that these 2 guys can come in and instantly, you know, make your speed better. So there is some uncertainty around what they're going to do, fair, but this team's just not good enough. Bottom line, they're not good enough.
Farhan Lalji from TSS joining us. It's always brought to you by the Cooperators. It's time to get financially fit. Cooperators can build your plan that works for you. Cooperators, invest in your future together. I'm how do I word this? The Quinn Hughes not being able to go to the 4 Nations face-off, what Tkachuk says after, with everything that's gone on, I don't know if that helps the Vancouver Canucks case when it's time to re-sign this guy. Is that just another little notch on the belt on, hey, it's an excuse for me to get out of Dodge? No,
I don't think so. And first of all, like, what the hell does Brady Kachuk know about the situation, right? Like, it's the fact is the guy missed the next two games. He missed the next two games and was a game time decision for the next game. So, and look, I agree. I kind of felt the same way, to be honest. I didn't think that he was going to be cleared to play, or sorry, not cleared to play. Let me take that back. I didn't think the league would allow him to play. I did think that with the two practices he had, there was a chance he could go. It sounded like he felt good enough and that he wanted to go. I don't believe for a second, in hindsight, like the Canucks aren't going to let their best player, like a Hart Trophy candidate, miss two games just to prove a point to USA Hockey. Really? Like, were we really thinking that, Brady Kachuk? Give your head a shake. So, he couldn't play. He wasn't cleared. And, he's still not 100%. He's still shaking off some rust. It would have been pretty dangerous in hindsight to have thrown him into that environment, given what he looks like today as a player. And again, he looks good, but you can still tell there's some rust and recovery that needs to happen. So here's the deal. He's got 2 years left. He's not a guy going into his final year. He's got 2 more years, number one. And we all think there's a chance, if the organization doesn't get itself figured out, that he will leave. But I don't think this will be a part of that, right? I really don't, because next year he's going to be at the Olympics. This is going to be a distant memory, right? Like, if he's at the Olympics next year and they win, you really think he's going to care about losing a Four Nations final, right? Like, that's not going to be a thing anymore. So, yeah, they might lose him, but not because of this.
Shift over to football, and maybe CFL-ish or just football in general. We have things going on in Indianapolis. You've covered that, I suspect. You've been there. What's the take from there on our end? Is there anything that CFL fans, Canadian fans, should know about that's important?
Well, not really, right? I mean, the two Canadians haven't gone yet, Alec Iomanner and Curtis Rourke. Now, Curtis is not going to take part in any physical drills or anything like that, but he is going to be there to do interviews and get his knee checked and go through that process. I think Alec's going to really do well and elevate his stock. I mean, his stock is kind of varied depending on the mock you look at. I've seen him as late in the first round to high in the third round, right? I think he probably becomes a high second round pick. Alec Iomanner from Medicine Hat, Alberta, the receiver from Stanford. So, the guys that go to the combine all get drafted, and the guys that get drafted don't make their way to the Canadian Football League for a while. Truthfully, from a U.S. standpoint, the event is still great, but so much of the storyline becomes who's going to throw, who's not going to throw, who's going to test, who's not going to test. Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward aren't going to throw at the combine. Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe are going to throw at the combine. It just kind of depends on what your leverage points are, because the guys that are in the top half of the first round generally feel like they have nothing to gain. So those guys are going to do it at their pro day. And I think Shedeur's made a pretty good impression about just how confident he is regardless of the situation. And, he's been through 2 programs and turned both of those programs around at the collegiate level and feels he's equipped to do the same at the pro level. And I have no worry about his ability. I have no worry about his confidence and his headspace. I think Cam Ward's still probably going to be the top quarterback taken. There are some guys that can elevate. Abdul Carter, I think he got some good news that he doesn't have to get surgery on his foot. That he's not going to test right now, but he will at the Penn State Pro Day. So some of the top guys still leave you intriguing, but it's become a lot more about the teams. All the GMs and coaches are available at the front end of the combine. So when the Matthew Stafford thing breaks, and what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, what are the Browns and Steelers and Vegas and these quarterback needy teams going to do? The combine becomes more about that. I know for me, when I went to cover it, it was so much more about the networking. You go to St. Elmo's Steakhouse and you run into GMs and coaches and have a beer, and it's a great time from that perspective. It really is like a massive NFL convention. So I'd been away so much. Naylor and I kind of rock, paper, scissored it out. So he and Sanchez went, and I'm doing the draft.
I got a question for you on the combine around the real value that it brings to the GMs and the coaches that are looking at the players. Like the first round picks, they're not surprises. We're not sorting out kind of 1 to 32, if you will. But what they might be looking at is who's going to be in round 6 or 7. Would that be a greater way to say the depth that you're looking for in the combine?
Yeah, like the combine is just a verification tool, right? Will a guy run the time that you want? Will he lift as much as you want? Which aren't always an indication of football acumen, but they are an indication quite often of your preparation level and your commitment level, right? Like if you hit 5 more reps on the bench, is that making you a better football player? I don't know, but it does show that you're willing to put in the work to make the impression, right? And guys can go up or down. Like it's not going to put you in the number 1 spot. It's probably not going to put you in the top 5. But did Xavier Worthy last year with his 4.2 240, did that establish him as a first-round pick? It did. Right, there was some cachet there, fastest pick in the draft. Right, Isaiah Bond, the next Texas receiver, has said he's going to break Xavier Worthy's record tomorrow when they start running. Could that do something for him? Like you can rise or fall, but eventually they're going to go through this process. Right, they will then go through their pro days, and then you know what the coaches are going to do, the GMs are going to do. They're going to go back to the film. Right, and those physical measurements are just gonna measure where they are. Health wise, it'll validate certain things, but at the end of the day, they're going to go back to the film.
When did the pro days take over? When did that become more of a thing? Is there a player? Is there a date?
Yeah, I think in the last 5 years, because and really it's the agents that have done it, right? Because there's a lot of teams that want to say, I want to see if you're willing to compete. Right. And if you're a guy like Jackson Dart, he's the Ole Miss quarterback. And, for months we've been hearing there are only 2 quarterbacks with first round grades. Well, Jackson Dart's a pretty good quarterback. And on certain metrics, he's better than the 2 guys above him. Well, he's going to say, you know what? I'm going to compete at the combine and I'll do my pro day and everything else. I'm not afraid of the competition. Last year, Washington had a receiver, Roma Dunze, who was, a really great player and just said that, I'm going to come and compete. I'm not going to worry about everything else. And you saw him trying to work on his L drill. He did it like 10 times at the end of the combine, right? He was the last guy. Everybody else had turned out the lights. And that wasn't an exercise in trying to gain the time. It was a demonstration to teams that I'm going to work. Right. And then the agents have kind of taken some of that away because they want a posture. So, and they know a certain player, his stock can only drop. So they don't want him to train. Go to your pro day. It'll be a comfortable environment. You can pick your receivers. You'll have chemistry. We'll script everything for you. So they just want to put him in comfortable environments. So the agents have done this, and it really has been about 5 years since it's really, really trended that way. And we're seeing it a bit in the CFL draft too.
When you say to me there's only two first round quarterbacks, all I'll immediately go to is Tom Brady. I mean, there's always that exception that proves that the rule's wrong. Tom Brady's that guy. What, 6th round? Wasn't he in the 6th round he was picked?
Yeah.
Farhan
watches a lot of.
Let's not call the exception the norm, right? Like that's everybody's going to come in, and you're always going to have that player in the draft that's going to say, "I'm going to be the best decision you ever made, Mr. GM." Right? Like that's going to happen. Guys are going to grandstand. They're all so coached now, right? Like these agents bring them in, and they have former GMs that come in and interview, and they grill them and they grind them, and they tell them this is what to expect. And these guys are, they're very polished by the time they get to this point. And then, you get your top 30 meetings right after that, right, where a team gets to bring in 30 players. And you'll see a real indication of their interest level in various rounds. And then you get to really know guys in those settings, right? Like when you can do it where, it's a little less scripted and things like that. I think you tend to get to know a prospect a little better. Guys that get brought in for dinners with the coaches and management team and things like that. Like there's a lot of layers to the process. The combine used to be the end all be all. Now it's just one more notch on the belt.
Isn't Brock Purdy? Didn't he go last?
Yeah. Dead last.
Mr. Irrelevant. Yeah. Dead last. And he's negotiating a big long-term extension right now. Yeah. With the San Francisco 49ers. So it can happen. There's no doubt.
Yeah, all the scouting out there, maybe there's one that slips through. When you talk about those interviews, though, I always think there's a good friend of ours, Ross Mahoney, who obviously with the Washington Capitals, and he likes when they're having those interviews with players, he likes to ask them to tell them a joke. Right? They got to bring a joke. And they've had players leave and come back to the interview with their joke. So I was wondering if the NFL guys maybe think the same way about some of the players. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they ask him for jokes, but, there's so many things where you're trying to measure what sometimes is unmeasurable, right? A couple of years ago, you go into the draft and somehow a story leaks that C.J. Stroud's Wonderlic test is terrible, right? And it's like one of the worst ever. Now, it was a mistake, but, these types of things happen. Now they're actually changing the aptitude test. So to your point, like asking quirky questions or trying to be ahead of the curve and trying to, just think you can do it a little bit differently and get to know a guy better. player, and then you get a guy like Brock Purdy or Tom Brady that you can't always measure, right? And some guys are so built for the combine process, or the underwear Olympics as we call it, and you go through the whole thing, and a player is going to elevate because their measurables are so good, and then you screw up. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and some guys who in that controlled pro day setting can make a splash throw that'll go viral and everyone will go crazy. But sometimes you got to look at the tape and see who's productive. And a guy that might not have all the measurables, if you just get him in the right opportunity, can hit.
Yep. Did you hear the story about the Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz?
No, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Starbucks,
Farhan is a
big argument.
It's a guy that's been, they've got it during a Starbucks, huge argument, like a big fight. As a guy that's been in the media business a long time yourself, anything like that ever happen with you? There's probably, hey, let's be honest, because I was in it, then I left, and then I'm kind of back in it. I didn't even know what I'm doing, like volunteer hours. But I remember there were some guys sometimes that would just get under your skin. You don't want to go to their dates, basement, grab them out and give them. But anything for you?
Yeah, look, there's some guys that definitely, like there's the odd person that I deal with in different settings that kind of rubs me the wrong way. But I just have too much respect for the industry, right? Like our industry's under attack, guys. It started in 2016 with the concept of fake news, right? And so for me, like when the dust settles, even guys that I kind of side eye from time to time on certain areas, I can have a beer with them. And I'm not going to, and I also don't take myself seriously enough to go, like I have big opinions and all that, but I know it's just that. And I can laugh at myself, and I don't take myself seriously enough to feel like I need to get into a massive altercation with a guy. So not my thing.
We're always put into our place when we get home, aren't we? We really know where we rank. The kids.
My son tells me I look weird in a hat. So now I'm starting to wear a hat more just to piss him off, just to show him I can pull it off and I can wear a hat. It's like, Dad, I never see you in a hat. You look weird in a hat. I'm like, I'm gonna give my buddies at Kid Sport some love, and I'm gonna wear a hat for a while because my hair's not helping me.
That's right. Yeah. Stick it to them when you're walking into the kitchen. Give them a little bump too. Let them know you're there, right. Farhan.
That's right.
Hey, have a good weekend, and then we'll catch up next weekend, my man.
Boys, enjoy the weekend. Just so you know, I should turn my camera around because you will see it's like 17 degrees and sunny out here right now. Because you talked about being at the golf game. If you'd hit the bet, you'd be playing golf out here. I might go later today. In fact, you've inspired me. I'm going to grab my son and we're going to go play 9 holes later today.
Wear a hat for him, though. Yeah, live Farhan. No,
I'll wear on the golf course. I'll wear a bucket hat. They're used to seeing me in a bucket hat. They're not used to seeing me in a ball cap.
There we go.
We'll get you a SportsCage one. That's what we'll do. We'll get you something cool to wear.
Do it.
Yeah. Hit him straight. Next week, we'll find out what you shot.
Yeah.
See you, Farhan.
Cheers.
See you guys.